Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is 1.3, finishing up Chapter 1, interactions between organisms, and I should say specific interactions, because these are very specific. Some of them are a bit broader, but they do get pretty intense. It is April 22nd of 2020. This is for my grade 9 science class, but anyone who's watching, happy to have you aboard. Mr. Benjamin here. I'm going to try to make this video a bit shorter. My first two videos in this unit, or in this chapter, were quite lengthy, and I know attention span of people these days, as I look at birds flying out around my backyard. Yeah, attention spans are very low these days, so I'm going to try to make this a bit quicker. Learning goals for this chapter, or for this video: define and discuss specific biotic, remember this means living, interactions amongst species in the same ecosystem. So we talked about different factors, or living and non-living, so we call those abiotic and biotic, vice versa actually, biotic and abiotic. And species in an ecosystem, remember the organization of life, we had organisms to populations to communities. So we're going to be looking at specific species, whether they're in the same population or they're just in the same community, they will have different interactions amongst themselves, okay? There's going to be interactions with species in different areas as well, but we're going to consider specifically just in one area. So what are two organisms going to be competing for example, or what resources will both want to use and only ultimately one of them might be able to use. Our second learning goal is describe carrying capacity, very important term, you've probably heard it before, and limiting factors. These two coincide. One doesn't really work without the other. In fact, carrying capacity is often based off of the limiting factors in an ecosystem, so we're going to describe both of those. We're going to start with predator and prey interactions. These are very basic, easy to understand. There's a little image here with a cat and a mouse. If you've ever owned a cat, you know they're very good hunters. You play with them and they love it. They chase, whether it's laser pointers or little toys on a stick, whatever it is, they love it, right? Because they're naturally, their role in the wildlife is to hunt. That's how they get their food. They are predators. They're in fact arguably the greatest predators in the ecosystem. Think about tigers, jaguars, pumas, mountain lions, lions. These are all just large cats. So those are the scary things you don't want to see. You know, I'd go up against a bear before I go up against a tiger, because a bear I can try to scare off. I can try to prevent him from doing something. I know people are going to tell me, no, you can't do that, sir. But it is proven. You make enough noise, you make yourself look big, a bear's going to go, you know what, I'm not going to mess with you, I'll go eat some berries instead, or I'll go slap some fish out of the water. But a giant cat's going to go bring it on, you know? So you can see this cat going for this mouse. The relationship between a cat and mouse is an example of a predator-prey relationship. So the cat, in this case, is our predator. Hunts for food, and this uses energy. So a predator's main concern or main use of their energy is to hunt. Okay? Predators hunt. Prey, in this case, the mouse is the prey. You know, I'll write that in too. So in this case, cat, mouse. Tom and Jerry would have been a great picture to have here. The predator is the food that the prey is the food that the predator is hunting for. That's not always the case. Again, they use energy as well, right? So the difference between life and death for many prey is, can I get away? Do I have the ability? For example, a lot of cats will go after birds. Birds, their greatest ability or their greatest strength to prevent their demise, we'll say, is to fly away. So cats naturally have greater jumping ability, and they can leap up and try to catch the bird. We also have to consider other skills or other abilities that animals might have, and instincts, that's a big one. Humans don't necessarily have these instincts anymore. We've kind of lost them. There is one thing that humans still have, the color green. So you can ask optometrists or any individual that works with the mind and eye specifically, we can see more shades of green than any other color. The reason for that is, while we were still living in the wild, our ancestors needed to differentiate. You know, in a field, between trees, is there something there? So many hunters, many predators tend to blend in with their environments. So think about a white fox in the Arctic, or a brown fox in a forest. So humans needed to be able to see the different shades of green and understand that shade of green is different. It shouldn't be that color. There's probably something there. So that's a part of that instinct idea. You know, we've kind of lost that now, but most humans don't necessarily have to be worried about being eaten by a tiger or a fox or a bear. At least people that are watching this video probably don't worry about that, and if they do, well, I don't know. I don't know what the situation is, so I can't comment. Other types of skills and defenses animals may have. If you think about the ability to camouflage, that's very important. If you think about mimicking ability, mimic, camouflage. So many frogs, for example, will have bright colors and spots on their back. Now, when we see bright colors, spots, things like that on reptiles, we think poisonous. So another organism might think, you know what, I could eat that frog, but do I really want to have problems in my intestine? And, maybe I'll find something else to eat. Certain birds, certain butterflies, like the monarch butterfly, they only consume a certain type of milkweed, and that milkweed is actually poisonous. So if an organism were to eat the monarch butterfly, they would actually ingest that poison as well. So that's another one. That's another one of those defenses that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but they use that to live, to survive. So that's the case of not always, right? Competition is another interesting one. We see competition every day. Now, when we think of competition, we think sports, events, games, movies, whatever it might be. Now, when we think about ecosystems, when you have two or more organisms, or more, competing for the same resource, okay? This could be space, this could be food, this could be water, this could be mating partners, because if an organism doesn't have a mating partner, its bloodline will die out, its DNA will no longer be in existence, because the natural part of life is to recreate and have your life force live on. So any one of these things, so let's food, water, space, sorry, I'm probably writing on the hand now, mating. Now so many animals, that looks terrible, I'm going to write it again, go through a process of courtship. The birds I was referring to earlier, if I just lean over and look outside, it's actually two, I want to call them pigeon doves. I don't know what the actual name for it is, but you've probably seen them. It looks like the male, slightly smaller than the female, is actually cleaning or grooming the female. My father used to breed canaries, and canaries would actually feed each other, so that was part of their courtship. And if the female, enjoyed what the male was feeding her, the male would then fertilize the eggs that the female laid. So that's a huge part of limiting factor or competition, because if you can't find a mate, like I said, you're not going to be able to live on. Natural selection comes into play here. So competition creates natural selection, or natural selection creates competition, I should say. If you have, I'll try to do a little drawing here. Say you got a big shelf, okay? And on this shelf, all of the food and water you could ever want is on this shelf. So let's say food and water. Okay? And I don't like using this example because I am shorter myself, but say a short person walks by. I want some of that food. I want some of that water. And you've got a taller person walking by, whose arms and legs are clearly not connected to his body. Let's put that there and there and there. So between these two individuals, who's going to get that food? Who's going to be successful in getting that food? Well, it's obviously going to be the tall person, because they can reach for it. And again, really poor example. This isn't how life actually works. But if this took place over the course of days, months, years, eventually this little guy would be no more. Okay? And this big guy would live on. Now, coming back to the mating aspect, this individual would be able to continue their life, find a mate, and their offspring, their children, would also be, or at least would have the genetics to be as tall. However, this little guy hasn't lived on. He wasn't able to mate. Therefore, his genetics, at least in the ecosystem that he's living in, are no longer a part of it. Okay, and that's a bit of an idea of natural selection works. Another way of looking at this is evolution. Everyone thinks, evolution chooses specific traits of being stronger, faster, taller. That's not necessarily true. It's being best suited for your environment. So both of these things, and again, I'm sorry, the hand is here, but I'll say best suited for environment. Okay? In many cases, this shorter individual, say the only way to get food was to crawl underneath, a tunnel or something. That shorter individual would be successful, whereas the tall person would not be successful. So in that case, the situation would be reversed. Charles Darwin is the kind of like the king of evolution. There's a better name for him, but he did a study on finches, which are birds. And do I have space anywhere here? Well, if you think of your average bird, try to draw one really quick. Wing like that, and a little beak, right? Now, if you think about all the different birds you know, one big difference, aside from the color and size, is the size of their beak. Okay. Some birds have long, thin beaks. For example, hummingbirds, or can't think of anything else. Other birds have short beaks, like canaries, cardinals, robins. There's the blackbird with the blue head. I want to call it a mackerel. I don't think that's the name. Some birds have big beaks, like a toucan, or that kind of looks like a tongue. That's weird. Toucan's the one that comes to mind, but there's a lot of different birds that have big beaks. Big, hard beaks, we'll say. Other birds have big, kind of soft beaks. Let's see if I can draw what I'm trying to talk about. That I don't know what that looks like, but think of a pelican. You should probably find a picture of that. But a pelican's got that big, kind of loopy beak. Now, all of the birds that I've mentioned consume different materials, whether it's seeds, fish, insects, nectar. They all eat different things. Therefore, if you were to take all of those birds and put them on the same island and only have large, hard-shelled seeds to eat, the birds with the little beaks wouldn't be able to eat them. Birds with the long, thin beaks wouldn't be able to eat them. The birds with the big looping beaks, like a pelican, wouldn't be able to eat them. The only bird that would survive would be the toucan, because the toucan's beak would be strong enough to break it and consume that shell, or consume the fruit inside of the shell. So all of those other birds would die off. Only the toucans would live. That would be natural selection, because the toucan would be best suited for its environments. Okay? If you were to take those same birds and put them on an island where there were only insects, the birds with the little beaks and the quick, fast beaks would be able to live, whereas the toucans would die out and the pelicans would die out. If you were to take all those birds and put them on an area where there's a lot of fish, the pelican would be able to consume a lot of fish, whereas the toucan and the little birds would all die out. So it really is, whatever your environment is, or your ecosystem, it's going to be best suited for those individuals that survive. Symbiosis. This is always a fun one to talk about. This is the very close interaction between two organisms, okay? Think about Spider-Man. He's wearing the Venom suit right here, right? Venom, and then Carnage comes in afterwards, and storylines probably changed since my time. But anyways, this is actually called Symbiote, Spider-Man. So Venom, the suit, or at least the parasite, which we'll talk about later, kind of lives inside or around Spider-Man. So Venom now has a vessel to which he can move around and live. What he gave to Spider-Man was a lot of strength and a lot of new abilities and made him faster and stronger. So Spider-Man loved it until the point that Venom kind of took over and Spider-Man was like, nope, you gotta go. Anyways, 3 different kinds of symbiosis. There's mutualism, where both benefit. Both organisms benefit, okay? We call this +1/+1, okay? Both sides have +1. There's communalism, where only one benefits, okay? We call this +1/0. So you have benefit for one organism, no benefit for the other. And then you have parasitism, where one organism benefits and the other, it's actually at the expense of the other. Okay, so we call this one +1 -1. Okay, so this one's bad. So think of the word parasite. That's generally speaking not good. Often if a human has something living inside of them, we call that a parasite because they're living off of our body and they're not providing us with anything of benefit. Okay, we also have many mutualistic relationships. For example, you hear the word E. coli and you think, oh, that's bad, it's in water, no good. E. coli actually live in our small intestine and they help digest food and absorb nutrients. They're given a safe space to live, and we have the ability to consume different foods and get more nutrients out of them. If that E. coli were to get into different parts of our body, that would then be parasitism because it would actually hurt us. So we'd be the -1 and they would still be the +1. One of my favorite examples is obviously from The Simpsons. I use this show a lot in my teaching. There's so many good scenes. Anyways, it's an episode where Homer and the kids, I think they drop off Stampy, I think it is, No, I'm mixing up the episodes. Anyways, there's a bird, whatever kind of bird it is, sitting on top of an elephant, and Homer says he's killing him, or he's killing the elephant. He's killing him. Realistically, Lisa corrects him, It says he's actually grooming him. And in this case, what's happening is the bird is eating the insects off the back of the elephant. So the bird looks at the elephant and goes, oh, hey, great, there's a huge meal over there. Of course, he's not eating the elephant. The elephant says, oh, thank you for eating those bugs because they were starting to itch me. Okay? And he's getting irritated by that and he can't do anything. The day that an elephant can reach up and start scratching his back is the day I no longer live on this earth. The bird not only gets a nice treat, but I don't know if you've ever seen a lion attack an elephant. I don't think they would, because that would be a fight they wouldn't want to do, right? So the bird gets some sort of protection from living off the elephant as well, okay? Later in the episode, or it's actually the next scene, Homer has a bird on his head. Marge comes in and says, what are you doing with that bird? And he goes, he's grooming me. And he says something like elephant fresh. It's pretty good. Love that scene. So, equilibrium, another word for balance, okay? This is the idea that in any situation, in any ecosystem, there will always be a form of balance. Mother Nature will take over and create balance for it, okay? It coincides off of two things, the birth rate and the death rate in an area. So the birth rate is number of organisms entering. Sorry, I just realized I'm at 16 minutes already. An ecosystem. So this specifically, it's in the name, it's about birth, but if any organism were to migrate into the ecosystem, that kind of falls under it as well, in lesser terms, but Death rate is number of organisms leaving an ecosystem. Forgive my writing, I do want to get through this quick, like I said, at 17 minutes now. So this equilibrium considers these two things. If you have an influx, too many animals being born, too many animals moving in, ultimately there's going to be animals dying off. The reason for that is resources, and we actually talk about on the next slide, slide over, we're going to talk about limiting factors, okay? There's only a certain number of resources that can go around. If you think about the world we live in, okay? There's many places in the world that are wasteful, and there's many places in the world that don't have enough. Both make do. If they don't make do, unfortunately, death is the answer. Death is not the answer, but the outcome. Okay? The death rate of an area, if the death rate is too high, then more animals can move in because there's more resources. So these two will they'll always be linked. If one of them goes up, the other one goes down. If one of them goes down, the other one goes up. Carrying capacity, this is something that you should have heard before. It is the maximum number of organisms. Oh, excuse me, I wrote this out wrong. Number of organisms an ecosystem can support. Okay? So this considers both birth-death rate and limiting factors. Limiting factors, again, we'll talk about in the next slide. To give you an idea of how carrying capacity works, it doesn't necessarily mean that as soon as there's X number of organisms in an area, everything else dies off. Depending on who you ask, if you ask me personally, I think the Earth is well past its carrying capacity in terms of how much resources we are using. Now, if we all adjusted our lifestyle, of course it would be able to support it, but we're doing a lot of long-term damage. Say the Earth probably has a carrying capacity of around 2 to 3 billion, maybe a bit more. Now, we are significantly over that amount, which is why you see so many deaths occurring when they shouldn't occur. Okay? To put it in perspective in terms of a visual, if you look at this graph, we have time against number of organisms. If this is an ecosystem, as an ecosystem starts off, say this is, 1 year in. This is 5 years in. This is 10 years in. In the first year, you're going to see a sharp increase in population, right? Whether that is organisms moving in because there's so many resources, or those organisms that are already there are super successful and can mate and create more offspring. You get to a point, however, where you're at your carrying capacity. And that's right here. So say it's the 10-year mark. Now it's, okay, well, there isn't enough food to go around. There's enough food for this amount of organisms, whatever that amount of organisms is. Say this is, 200,000. You can't support more in that ecosystem, though. So that number has to stay there. And at this point, we are at equilibrium. Okay, so birth rate equals death rate. Birth rate equals death rate. So for every well, the approximate value, but for every organism that passes, another organism can be born, or every organism that is born, another organism passes. Okay? Limiting factors. These are factors that prevent the increase of a population ecosystem. Excuse me, I really hope that doesn't sound horrible on the video. Competition, resources, space, predation, disease. These are just quick examples of it, okay? I'm going to cut the video here. We're at 20 minutes and 30 seconds. I think that's my side. Yeah. Limiting factors, you can do a lot of reading about that. It's very, very straightforward when you consider what it is. We're going to say thank you. I really like this gray. I might try to write with this in another video. But that's it for now. Have a great